All right, so let's move to this parable. This is the dishonest manager. This is quite the rat's nest of paradoxes, this one. Luke 16, 1 to 15. Jesus also told this story to his disciples. There was a rich man who had a manager to handle his affairs, and a report was brought to him that the man was wasting his money. So he called in the manager and said to him, "What is this that I hear about you? Prepare a final accounting of your work, for you can no longer be my manager." And the manager said to himself, "What shall I do now, since my master is taking the job away from me? I have not the strength to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. But I do know what I can do to make sure that people will still receive me into their houses after I am put out of my position." So calling in his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, "How much do you owe my master?" The debtor said, 100 measures of olive oil. And the manager said, "Take your account, sit down quickly, and write 50 instead." Then he asked another, "And how much do you owe?" And the man said, 100 measures of wheat. And the manager said, "Take your account and make it 80. In this, the master had to acknowledge the practical shrewdness of the dishonest manager. For the children of this world are wiser than the children of light in dealing with their own kind. And I tell you, there's a lesson here for you as well. If you possess the wealth of this world, even though that wealth is unrighteous in itself, you should use it to make friends and to do good, so that when your life is over, you will be received into the eternal dwelling places. Well, let's start with that. I'll finish the rest of it in a minute. So I'm going to let you start with that.
You want me to start on that?
I'm going to let you start with that. Yeah, because it's such a, such a surprise, this particular parable.
Okay, I've been thinking about this parable forever, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think I completely understand it. I have intimations about it, and the best way I can understand it is in an amoral application. If I use an amoral application, then I'm able to understand some reality to it, and you could think about it in a job situation, which is that imagine a manager that is just kind and merciful to his employees, and then he gets in trouble with the boss. The people that are under him that have been treated kindly, even if it's in the name of the company in some ways, like he's literally forgiving the debts of the person above him, that those will become like a body for him. And that's a way to understand it. It's like if we extend compassion and mercy around us, even in this weird way that he's describing, the people become like a body that will help you land, like that you'll land in their care is the way that I understand it. So I see it more as an ontological reality, but obviously the morality to it seems to have something to do with, with the way that God says, if you forgive, then I will forgive you. But the weird thing about the parable is that he's not forgiving, he's forgiving the debts of the boss, and that's what makes it very strange. But that is how far I go with that.
Well, there's the practical shrewdness aspect, too, which I think is interesting, because what the manager...
Because he's being really tricky.
Well, he's being tricky, but he does a bunch of things at once. One reading of this, too, is, he gets something for his mercy, but his boss gets something, too. He gets some of the debt repaid. And so there's a practical side of business management that has that shrewdness. And I think part of what Christ is also referring to here is, I see this often among people who can't run a business at all. They don't know how to do it. And so they regard their inability to be practical and useful as an index of the morality that's superior to that.
But think of this in a practical, like, business sense. Imagine you have someone who's got clients. You're a salesman, or you manage certain clients. You're getting in trouble with your boss. So what you do is you say, "Hey, just pay half of what you owe. And then when you'll fire me, then I know one of you is going to hire me." That's what this is implying.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you.
So there's I think you really have to see it amorally, because my goodness.
But is there a metaphor in part that people who are intermediaries for the Word of God, if they're imperfect themselves, still provide people access to that prosperity or light, even if they're flawed?
I think that's quite close to the key. I think the key is in verse 8, where he says, "For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light." So there is that, the element of dishonesty is important because of the contrast that Jesus is drawing later on. He's saying, well, this is a dishonest manager, but this is how shrewd they can be, and this is how shrewd they are. how much more should children of light, we can learn from the dishonest people. We can learn,
should have their shrewd, that's the serpent eye.
Not from their dishonesty,
something like that.
but the shrewdness and the foresight for financial provision and security.
How would you see it in this context, the shrewdness? Like, how would you apply it?
The urgency.
I want to learn. I want to understand this.
Under the pressure of the urgency of it, he does whatever he's got to do to get it done, and he's smart about it. He's dishonest, and that's bothered the whole tradition. All of our great teachers are, what the heck, the Lord is like recommending you be dishonest. But I think it's the urgency of the spiritual, that if we get this upset about our economic state of affairs, that we'll go to that extent and we'll use our minds in such a clever way. How much more should we be under the urgency of the spiritual?
But it also doesn't help to flap about in a crisis morally, right? At least he acts,
He acts, he does something, and I think the Lord wants us to be that attentive to the spiritual order as this man is to the material world.
Christ is a master at using short, mysterious stories. They change the listener who takes them seriously.
The person that you do not think could ever be virtuous, well, let me show you, this is the person who is fulfilling the law and the prophets.
I don't believe in that promise. I'll just be honest on this point.
Then it hit me. I saw it.
This Jew is very frightened of a post-Christian society.
The power of love.
I don't want to be in a Hallmark card, I tell you.
We've got our work cut out for us, gentlemen. I sure hope we're up to the task.
But the reason why I think there's a mystery that's deeper is because it has to do with forgiveness. And because in the Lord's Prayer, we have this idea that we forgive our debts, It's like forgive our debtors. And so it seems like it's relating to that, but the way it's structured is so weird that it just breaks my...
I think that's right.
I want John, if you can solve this for me, I'll be grateful forever.
Oh, okay, sure.
Solve it for us.
But I do want to say something. I mean, and I think between us, we're getting the multidimensionality, which is important. And I like this parable.
Yeah, because
I like this parable.
It's a proper koan.
Yeah, it's a proper koan. And we're really wrestling because, this isn't how the story's supposed to turn out.
That's right.
Right? And it's like, well, and we're asking ourselves, why? And here's a suggestion, and I only offer it as that. And I'm not as learned as some of you are about the scriptures and things like that. But, if you look at, I do work on the psychology of rationality and wisdom. And here's what that work reliably shows. Intelligence is necessary, but not sufficient. But it's necessary, right? It's necessary. We like to think that wisdom could be just captured by the moral dimension of our behavior. He keeps talking about wisdom, like shrewdness, but it's not, right? Intelligence is not sufficient. It's 0.3 correlated with rationality and even less with measures of wisdom. But it's a necessary condition. Like you can't, I'm hearing him say, right, don't forget, you have to be intelligent. You have, right? To be wise is not just to have an emotional stance or even a moral stance. It is to have a set of cognitive abilities properly. All he's just demonstrating are cognitive abilities. He's not demonstrating any
it relates beautifully to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
The innocence of but clever as the serpent. That you have to make your way cannily through the world, as this guy is able to do. And that makes a lot of sense to me.
It's also tied to what, Jordan, you're talking about, you're working with your clients on.
How to make your way.
How you make your way
Practically.
in very different, right? You can't just float around. I mean, it's in some ways it's imploring to not just float around in a detached moral realm.
And I think that's where he starts, right, is that he's an irresponsible steward. There's no connection between his action and the reality he's supposed to be tending. And there's this kind of wake-up moment when he thinks, that's it, I'm out of a job in the street.
Right.
And what's interesting, I think, is that in a sense, he becomes the good steward in that moment, right? He actually begins to actively steward the resources that are before him. And so it's not...
You think he becomes a good
what
steward?
I'm saying is
He's become a worse steward.
What I'm saying is there's the immorality of the story that is mysterious notwithstanding. What I'm saying is that's precisely what the steward, the king says, or the rich man says, is that, gosh, you were this really bad steward, but now you've acted wisely. So in a certain sense, he's developed the virtues that he didn't have in the crisis.